Okay, hello everybody. So this is another installment in my series about what the summarizing the cognitive functions and giving a little bit of background description of at least what I think they are and what they're doing, the role they play in the various types. Um, I have an intro video up. I invite you to watch that if you haven't watched it already, really to just sort of describe the caveats and the nuances of all of this, just so I don't have to do it in each video. But it's okay if you haven't watched the video. You know, it's fine. You can still maybe get something out of this, even without watching that. So, but you know, the point is, you know, it's basically, you know, the way that I describe the functions, stuff that I've picked up along the way, and it might differ from, you know, other sorts of descriptions or ways of thinking about it that you might have read or seen in other videos or read in books and blog posts and whatnot. And that's fine. You know, it's all part of discourse. So, um, okay, so extroverted sensing, SE, is the topic for this video. And this one, again, you know, these perception functions are kind of hard to nail down. They're hard to describe. But when I think of extroverted sensing, and this is probably one, to be honest, that um, probably took me the longest to sort of really understand what it's getting at. So, you know, at a core level, extroverted sensing is, you know, just taking in sensory information from the outside world, right? You know, what do you see? What do you hear? Jung sort of described it as just knowing that something is there, not necessarily what it is or what the value is of it, but just knowing that it's there, right? Where in space is it? And what sort of shape is it? What color is it? Is it coming to you? Is it moving towards you? Is it moving away from you? If so, how quickly? You know, that kind of stuff. Lots of information that your brain has to take in and process, you know, just at the perceptual level. But when you're, you know, so that's sort of the baseline of it. But that's, you know, just sort of simple perception, right? That, you know, arguably a computer can do. So what is the cognitive processing going on? And I would argue your it's dis- your brain or your mind deciding what to do or how to interact with this information out there. You know, taking action on it. Um, and so somebody with heavy SE is usually described as a doer, right? They like to do things. They like to jump out of airplanes or jet ski or go out dancing or perform on stage or whatever, right? I mean, you sort of think of the classic ESFP performer, right? They're out there doing things. They're on stage, they're singing, they're dancing, everybody's having a good time. Or they're the class clown and they're, you know, engaging with everybody. But what is fundamentally going on is that they are people who take action. And don't really have a whole. I don't want to say they don't have any inhibition. That would be wrong. You know, because part of having well developed, highly functioning SE is knowing when to take action and when not to take action. And so, you know, it's sort of your classic athletes, entertainers, performers, people who are out, daredevils, people who are out in the physical world doing things, you know. But it doesn't necessarily have to just be, you know, people who are entertaining, you know, like athletes or actors or musicians or anything. You know, it could be somebody in the business world that's just the type of person who just gets up at 6 o'clock every morning and makes, you know, cold calls, potential clients, 30 of them before noon every day. Why? Because he just does things, right? And he or she likes to interact with the world and get things done. And so so again, it's very hard to articulate. It's hard to pin down in using descriptive verbal language. But the best that I can think of it is it's the function that pulls the trigger. It's the function that decides go or no go. Am I going to do this thing or am I not going to do this thing? And so if you contrast the heavy SE users, like your ESFPs, your ESTPs, that are out there doing things constantly, you contrast those with people that might have inferior SE, either in their fourth function or completely polar SE in their seventh function, that tend to be procrastinators, tend to think like, should I do this now or should I wait till later? Maybe there's some benefit toward, for waiting for later. And they, especially if you're SE polar, like an INTP or an INFP, again, it's where SE's in their seventh slot. There's other videos on that. Again, they tend to be not only procrastinators, but just have a hard time, doing whatever it is. I think of like the dithering Hamlet, right? So when you think of Hamlet, the classic description of him was, he just couldn't make a decision. He just couldn't decide whether or not to pull the trigger because every time he had to make some sort of decision, he'd just stand there and give you like a 20-minute monologue about, whether or not he should be doing this or not doing this. It's probably an INFP, I guess, but just having a hard time pulling the trigger. Luke Skywalker is probably the other classic literary INFP. And Yoda had to bash him with the stick and say, do or do not. There is no try, right? Just do it, right? And the whole point of at least the first Star Wars was getting Luke to use the Force and pull the trigger, like literally pull the trigger and drop the bomb into the Death Star, right? So SE, getting away from Star Wars and back to SE. So SE is about that part of the brain and the part of the mind that pulls the trigger and gets you to actually take action and do whatever it is. And so it obviously is going to have to work with the other functions, right? So if you watch my TE video, I talk about TE being, having the ability to figure out how to get from your current state to a goal state. So in other words, if somebody gives you a pile of wood and says, here's a pile of wood, make me a table, your TE is going to figure out the steps along the way, how to, what do I do first? What do I do second? What do I do third? To eventually get yourself a table. But your SE also has to come along for the ride and get you to actually take the action and do it, right? And interact with the outside world. Because your TE could, if you're just a brain in a jar, your TE could probably figure out, okay, here's what would have to be done to get from point A to point Z. But without your SE sort of stepping in and saying, okay, now we're going to take action, and we're going to read the environment and take in that sensory information and then figure out how to actually interact with it to do whatever it is we're trying to do, right? So as human beings, we're actual physical animals in the world, and we can't just make things happen by thinking about them. It would be great if we could, but we can't. So, you need some sort of function that's going to tell you, okay, pull the trigger, take action, or prevent you from doing it. Like, now is not the time, don't take action. And so when you have the heavy SE users, your ESFPs, your ESTPs, they're the people of action. They're the people who just get up and do things, whether it's performing in front of other people or just getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning and being the first person in the office and making 20 cold calls, before lunch every day, and chasing down that, potential client. They are the doers, and that's generally how they're described in the community, and that's the way to think of SE, so that all of that sort of makes sense. Okay, I think that's really about it for SE. It's very hard to sort of pin down description wise, but if you just sort of think of it as taking action, pulling the trigger, and then sort of engaging the body, when you are actually taking action. Yeah, that's SP. Or I say SP because that's the temperament, but SE, so extroverted sensing. Okay. Happy to take any questions, or, if you got any thoughts on it, let me know. Otherwise, I will see you at the next video. All right. Thanks.